Imagine you're in an important meeting. You share an idea you've been working on for weeks. The silence that follows seems deafening. Some eyes look away. Others discreetly check their phones. Your heart races. An inner voice screams, they hated it. You're a failure. The meeting continues, but you're no longer truly present. Your mind is consumed with feelings of rejection. Or maybe you sent a message to someone special. Hours pass. The status is seen, but there's no response. Is it forgetfulness? Disinterest? Anger? The uncertainty turns into a spiral of self-critical thoughts that seem to have no end. If you've ever experienced situations like these, and who hasn't, you know how devastating the perception of rejection can be for our peace of mind and self-esteem. Even more challenging is that we're often unsure whether the rejection is real or just a construct of our anxious mind. This is where Stoic wisdom proves particularly valuable. Over 2,000 years ago, philosophers such as Epictetus, Seneca, and Marcus Aurelius developed a system of thought that gives us powerful tools to navigate the turbulent waters of human relationships with balance and clarity. Stoicism is not, as many people think, a philosophy of indifference or emotional coldness. It is, in fact, a practical path to developing a strong and serene mind, capable of discerning what is really happening in the world around us, without the distorting filters of our insecurities, fears, and excessive desires. In this video, we'll explore how Stoic principles can help us not only identify genuine signs of rejection, distinguishing them from projections of our anxiety, but also respond to them in a constructive and dignified way. We'll see how to turn these painful moments into opportunities for self-discovery and growth. I don't promise to eliminate the pain of rejection. No honest philosophy could do that. What I do offer is a way to face it with dignity and wisdom, keeping your inner peace intact even in the face of the strongest winds of other people's disapproval. Let's start our journey by exploring how the Stoics distinguish between objective facts and subjective interpretations, the fundamental basis for correctly identifying the signs of rejection without amplifying them with our insecurities. But first, subscribe to our channel to strengthen our support network. Okay? Chapter 1. The Stoic Perspective on Rejection. In Stoic philosophy, there is a crucial distinction that revolutionizes our way of perceiving the world: the separation between what happens externally and the judgments we make about those events. As Epictetus wrote in his handbook, it is not things that disturb men, but the opinions they have about those things. When we talk about rejection, this distinction becomes particularly revealing. What actually constitutes a rejection? A non-invitation to an event? A sideways glance during a conversation? An unanswered message? These are objective facts. The conclusion that I was rejected or I'm not good enough is a subjective interpretation we attach to the event. The Stoics call these first impressions we have of events phantasia, initial appearances or impressions. The Stoic sage learned not to trust these impressions immediately, but to examine them carefully before giving his assent. This process is called suspension of judgment. Let's apply this to an everyday example. You send a job proposal by email and don't receive a response after 3 days. The objective facts are simple. You send an email. 3 days have passed. There's been no response. But notice how many possible interpretations there are. My proposal was so bad, it didn't even deserve a response. They are too busy to respond now. The email may have gone to spam. They are considering other proposals first. The person in charge may be on vacation or sick. How do we know which interpretation is correct? The truth is that without additional information, we cannot be sure. And this is where many of us made a crucial mistake. We automatically select the most negative interpretation and treat it as fact. There's an explanation for this phenomenon. Our brains evolved to detect threats, including social threats like rejection. From an evolutionary perspective, it was safer to assume the worst. But in the modern world, this natural tendency often causes us unnecessary suffering. Stoic practice invites us to develop what they called apatheia. Not apathy in the modern sense of the word, but a clarity of mind free from excessive emotional disturbance. With this clarity, we can observe social cues as they really are, not as we fear they are. A practical exercise we can do is the following. When we feel rejected, let's write down exactly what happened, using only verifiable facts. Then, list all the possible interpretations we can give to these facts, from the most negative to the most positive. This simple exercise already creates a space between the event and our reaction, allowing us to respond more wisely. Marcus Aurelius practiced a similar exercise in his meditations. Eliminate opinion, and you eliminate the phrase, "I have been wronged." Eliminate the phrase, "I have been wronged," and you eliminate the wrong itself. Similarly, we can say, eliminate hasty interpretation, and you eliminate much of the suffering associated with perception of rejection. But being able to distinguish between facts and interpretations is only the first step. To truly deal with rejection signals in a Stoic way, we need to deeply understand what is and isn't within our control in social interactions, which brings us to the next fundamental principle of Stoicism. Chapter 2, Dichotomy of Control in Social Interactions. Some things depend on us, and some things do not depend on us. With these words, Epictetus begins his handbook, establishing what would come to be known as the dichotomy of control, perhaps the most transformative principle of Stoic philosophy. When we apply this principle to our social interactions and the way we deal with rejection, a powerful revelation emerges. We can control our posture, our actions, our attention, our responses, but we cannot control others' reactions, feelings, or thoughts toward us. This seemingly simple observation has profound implications. How often do we exhaust ourselves trying to ensure that everyone accepts, approves of, or admires us? How often do we modify our behavior, our opinions, or even our values to avoid any possibility of rejection? Stoicism invites us to recognize the futility of these efforts. Not because social acceptance is unimportant. The Stoics fully recognized our nature as social beings, but because they understood that trying to control the opinions of others is an impossible task that condemns us to constant frustration. As Epictetus warned, remember that what disturbs men is not things, but the judgments they make about things. And the judgments others make about us are completely beyond our control. Let's consider an example. You are in a social group and notice that a specific person seems to be avoiding interacting with you. What is within your control in this situation? Your posture and behavior. Your decision whether or not to initiate a conversation. The way you interpret the signs you observe. How you choose to respond emotionally to these signals. The lessons you learn from this experience. What is not under your control. Whether the person likes you or not. The reasons why she may be avoiding interaction. Whether she will change her behavior in the future. What she thinks about you when you're not there. How her actions are interpreted by her. Accepting this distinction is not resignation or defeat. It is liberation. When we stop trying to control the uncontrollable, we gain two fundamental things. First, energy to focus on what we can actually influence. Second, much greater clarity to observe social signals without the distortion of desperation for approval. It's as if we remove a distorting filter from our perceptual lenses. If we're not obsessed with securing acceptance at all costs, we can more accurately observe the signs that indicate genuine interest or real disinterest. One practical exercise for developing this awareness is what I call a control inventory. In an anxiety-provoking social situation, make two mental or physical, if possible, lists. What's in my control and what's not in my control. This exercise trains your mind to automatically recognize the limits of your influence. Hierarchals, a lesser-known Stoic philosopher, spoke of circles of concern, started with the inner circle, what we can directly control, expanded to circles of increasingly indirect influence until we reach the outer circle of things completely beyond our control. Wisdom, for the Stoics, was to recognize which circle each situation falls into. When we apply this wisdom to identifying signs of rejection, we gain a remarkable ability to observe these signs with equanimity, neither denying their existence when they are real, nor exaggerating their importance when they are ambiguous. And this leads us naturally to the next step, learning to concretely observe the nonverbal and behavioral signals that may indicate disinterest or rejection, but doing so with the mental clarity of someone who is not desperate for a specific outcome. Chapter 3, Body Language and Nonverbal Signals. The ancient Stoics were meticulous observers of human nature. Chrysippus, one of the leading philosophers of ancient Stoicism, wrote extensively about how emotions manifest themselves physically, a precursor to what we now understand as body language. It is fascinating to note that nonverbal communication accounts for about 55% of our total communication, according to modern studies. Ironically, it is also the dimension that we most often consciously ignore, while our subconscious continues to register these signals. To identify signs of rejection with Stoic clarity, we must first know what signs to look for. However, following the Stoic principle of suspension of judgment, we must observe them without jumping to conclusions, especially when the signs are ambiguous. Let's look at the main groups of nonverbal signals that can indicate disinterest or rejection. Facial expressions and eye contact. The human face is extraordinarily expressive, capable of communicating subtle emotional nuances. Potential signs of disinterest include reduced or avoided eye contact, smile that does not involve the eyes, the so-called social smile or courtesy smile, rarely raised eyebrows, a sign of surprise or interest, neutral or tense facial expression when you speak, frequently looking at other people or at the clock, body posture and orientation. Our body unconsciously orients itself toward what interests us and away from what we want to avoid. Body facing away during interaction. Gradual increase in physical distance. Closed posture, arms crossed, legs crossed moving away. Leaning backwards instead of forwards. Placing objects as barriers, bags, books, cups. Vocal and conversational patterns. Even when the words are polite, the tone and pattern of the conversation can reveal a lot. Consistently brief or monosyllabic responses. Monotonous tone of voice or without emotional variation. Slow response, long pauses. Lack of follow-up questions. Frequent interruptions or abrupt changes of subject. Avoidance and distancing behaviors. Specific actions that create physical or psychological distance. Checking the phone repeatedly. Constantly introducing third parties into the conversation. Avoid opportunities for individual interaction. Recurring cancellations of appointments. Increasing delay in responding to messages or calls. The Stoic approach invites us to observe these signs with the precision of scientists, not with the anxiety of someone desperately seeking approval or fearing rejection. As Marcus Aurelius advised, do not be disturbed by the representation of your imagination. Delimit the present according to your reason. A crucial aspect to consider is context. A single isolated signal is rarely conclusive. It is a consistent pattern of multiple signals, especially when it represents a change from previous behavior. That becomes more meaningful. We should also be aware of what modern psychologists call hypervigilance, a state of heightened alertness to signs of rejection that can be common in people with prior experiences of significant rejection or social trauma. This hypervigilance leads us to overinterpret neutral signals as negative. To avoid both denial and hypervigilance, we can practice what I call Stoic observation, the act of mentally registering the signs we observe without immediately attaching emotional significance to them. As Epictetus would say, first tell yourself what you are, and then do what needs to be done. One practical exercise is to keep a brief log of interactions that cause discomfort, noting only observable behaviors, without interpretations. When we review this log with some distance and time, we often notice patterns that were not evident in the heat of the moment, patterns in the behavior of others, as well as in our own reactions. However, even with the most careful observation, our fears and insecurities can distort our perception. How can we distinguish between real signs of rejection and projections of our own anxiety? This crucial question brings us to the next chapter. Chapter 4. Differentiating actual rejection from anxiety projections. The Stoics understood that our emotions are intimately linked to our beliefs and judgments. Seneca observed that it is not poverty that causes suffering, but the desire for wealth. Similarly, we can say that it is not rejection itself that causes our greatest suffering, but the fear of it and the stories we tell ourselves. Social anxiety, that persistent fear of negative evaluation by others, acts as a distorting lens through which we interpret social interactions. This lens often creates what psychologists call false positives, situations where we perceive rejection where none exists. So how do we distinguish between genuine signs of disinterest and projections of our own anxiety? How do we know when rejection is real and when it is just a phantom created by our insecurities? The first step is to recognize some characteristic patterns when we are designing. Catastrophizing. We interpret small, ambiguous signals as evidence of outright rejection. An unanswered message immediately turns into "she hates me." An unreceived invitation turns into "the whole group rejects me." Generalization. We extend a specific behavior into a universal pattern. "He seemed distracted today" becomes "he always ignores me." Mind reading. We assume we know other people's motivations and thoughts without sufficient evidence. "She didn't comment on my presentation because she thought it was terrible." Filtering. We focus exclusively on negative signals while ignoring positive ones. We notice the moment someone looked at their watch, but not the many moments when they smiled or showed interest. Personalization. We assume that behaviors that could have countless explanations are directed specifically at us. "The group is laughing. They must be making fun of me." The Stoics developed several techniques to combat these distortions, and modern psychology confirms their effectiveness. One of the most powerful is a practice that Marcus Aurelius called viewing from above, a mental exercise in which we imagine observing a situation from a great height, seeing it from a broader perspective. When we apply this technique to social situations, we begin to realize how many behaviors we interpret as rejection have little to do with us. The person who seems distant may be preoccupied with personal problems. The person who doesn't respond may be overwhelmed. The group that didn't include us may simply have assumed we were busy. Another powerful exercise is Socratic questioning, inspired by the Stoic dialogues. When we feel rejected, we can ask questions like, "What is the concrete evidence that supports my interpretation? Are there alternative explanations for the observed behavior? If a friend were in the same situation, what advice would I give? Is this behavior consistent, or does it represent a sudden change? Am I considering the full context of the situation?" A case study. Imagine you send an important message to a coworker and, after 24 hours, you still haven't received a response. Social anxiety can trigger thoughts like "he's ignoring me," or "my message was so stupid that he didn't even bother to respond." Epictetus taught that it is not the things themselves that disturb us, but the judgments we make about them. This principle becomes especially valuable when we try to distinguish between real and imagined rejection. A key sign that we may be projecting our anxiety is when the pattern repeats itself across multiple contexts with different people. If we consistently perceive rejection across multiple social circles, it's more likely that we're dealing with an internal filter than a universal external pattern. However, even when we identify genuine signs of disinterest or rejection, the Stoics offers a revolutionary approach, cultivating a healthy form of indifference to these signs without denying their existence or allowing them to determine our self-worth. Chapter 5. The Practice of Stoic Indifference. Indifference is perhaps one of the most misunderstood Stoic concepts. When the Stoics spoke of adiaphora, things that are indifferent, they were not promoting apathy or callousness. They were, in fact, drawing a crucial distinction between that which has intrinsic moral value, virtue, and that which, while it may be preferable, does not determine our excellence as human beings. Social acceptance in the Stoic view is a preferable, not an absolute good. It is natural and reasonable to prefer acceptance to rejection, just as it is natural to prefer health to illness. But making this preference a desperate necessity is a path to mental disturbance. As Epictetus put it, remember that you are an actor in a play, the character which the author has determined. Short, if he wants it to be short. Long, if he wants it to be long. If he wants you to play the part of a beggar, play that part with talent too. This perspective offers us a revolutionary approach to dealing with signs of rejection. We can observe them clearly without denial, but also without allowing them to define our worth or determine our inner peace. When we cultivate Stoic indifference, something remarkable happens. Our perception of social cues paradoxically becomes more acute and accurate. Why? Because the desperate need for approval distorts our perception as much as the paralyzing fear of rejection. When we are not emotionally dependent on the outcome of an interaction, we can see the cues for what they really are. Imagine observing a social interaction like an anthropologist studying an unfamiliar culture with genuine curiosity but no personal investment in the outcome. This is the mindset that Stoic indifference allows us to adopt. One practical exercise for developing this quality is what I call scientific observation. When we enter social situations that would normally provoke anxiety about acceptance or rejection, we set ourselves the task of observing human behavior as a scientist would observe any other natural phenomenon, with interest, precision, and emotional detachment. Another powerful exercise is the practice of preference without attachment. We can explicitly articulate to ourselves, I prefer to be included in this group, but my value as a person does not depend on it. This simple phrase, when internalized, creates a crucial psychological space between a natural desire for connection and a compulsive need for approval. Marcus Aurelius offers a complementary perspective when he writes, when someone causes you pain, do not immediately conclude that he has caused you harm. First examine whether he has not become for you the occasion of forming a correct judgment about what has happened. This perspective invites us to see challenging interactions, including potential rejections, as opportunities to practice virtues such as self-discipline, courage, and equanimity. Rejection becomes no longer a verdict on our worth, but a test of our character and a chance to strengthen our virtues. The benefits of cultivating this form of indifference are profound. Psychological freedom. We stop being emotional hostages to other people's approval. Clearer perception. Without the filter of fear or despair, we see social cues more accurately. More authentic relationships. Paradoxically, when we are not desperate for acceptance, we tend to form more genuine connections. Stable self-esteem. Our sense of worth no longer fluctuates based on the reactions of others. However, developing this healthy indifference doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process that requires consistent practice. And one of the most effective practices the Stoics offered us for this purpose is the exercise of premeditation of adversity or negative visualization. We're more than halfway through our teachings. So, if you're enjoying the video, subscribe to our channel. Okay? Chapter 6. The Negative Visualization Exercise. Premeditatio malorum. The premeditation of evils or adversities. This Stoic practice, seemingly pessimistic at first glance, turns out to be one of the most powerful tools for developing emotional resilience, especially when faced with the possibility of social rejection. Seneca explained this exercise this way: he who foresees all attacks of fortune long before they occur will receive them weakened. In other words, mentally anticipating potential difficulties prepares us psychologically to face them with greater equanimity when and if they occur. Applied to identifying signs of rejection, negative visualization operates on multiple levels. Emotional desensitization. By visualizing rejection scenarios in advance, we reduce the emotional impact when we encounter real signs. Strategic preparation. By thinking in advance about how we would virtuously respond to a rejection, we are better prepared to act wisely in the moment. Realistic perspective. The practice reminds us that rejection is a normal part of the human experience, not an exceptional catastrophe. Enhanced attention. When contemplating possible challenging scenarios, we train our minds to notice relevant cues more accurately. How can you actually practice negative visualization before important social situations? Let's explore a practical protocol. Step 1. Visualize a scenario before a social event or important interaction. Take a few minutes to clearly visualize what it would be like to face signs of disinterest or rejection. Imagine specific details: how the person might act, what facial expressions they might display, what kind of responses they might give. Step 2. Emotional connection. Allow yourself to feel momentarily the emotions that would arise in the scenario: discomfort, shame, sadness. Don't try to suppress these emotions, but observe them with curiosity. Step 3. Virtuous response. Visualize yourself responding to the situation with the Stoic virtues: maintaining dignity, not retaliating, staying true to your values, responding with understanding rather than defensiveness. Step 4. Expanded perspective. Mentally expand the time horizon. Imagine what this particular interaction will look like in a week, a month, a year. Realize its true proportion in the grand scale of your life. To illustrate, imagine that you are about to present an important idea to a group. Negative visualization would involve imagining in detail: blank faces as you speak, critical questions, someone checking their phone during your presentation, silence when you finish instead of enthusiasm. By visualizing these scenarios, you are not attracting negative energy, as some interpretations of positive psychology might suggest. You are, in fact, Prepare your mind to remain stable regardless of external circumstances. The true goal of Stoic training. It is important to distinguish between constructive negative visualization and destructive anticipatory anxiety. The fundamental difference lies in the quality of attention and intention. Stoic negative visualization. It is deliberate and controlled. Includes visualization of your virtuous response. It ends with an affirmation of your values and capabilities. It is time-limited. You define when it starts and ends. Anticipatory anxiety. It is automatic and invasive. Focuses only on what could go wrong, not how to respond. Reinforces feelings of helplessness. It tends to last indefinitely. Epictetus advises students, in any activity, consider what comes before and what comes after, and then begin. Negative visualization allows us to consider what comes after the possible challenges in a structured and empowering way. An added benefit of this practice is that it often reveals that even the worst-case scenarios are bearable. As Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, pain is either tolerable or terminal. If it is tolerable, tolerate it. If it is terminal, that too will be tolerable. When we regularly apply negative visualization, we develop a crucial skill, the courage to face the truth about our social interactions, even when that truth is uncomfortable. This courage, one of the cardinal virtues of Stoicism, is the subject of our next chapter. Chapter 7. The virtue of courage in the face of truth. For the Stoics, courage was not just bravery on the battlefield, but an inner willingness to face reality as it is, not as we would like it to be. This conception of courage aligns perfectly with the challenge of identifying and accepting signs of rejection without self-deception. As Seneca observed, sometimes even living is an act of courage. In our modern hyper-connected society, where social validation is constantly just a click away, honestly identifying signs of rejection, neither minimizing nor exaggerating them, has indeed become an act of courage. Fear distorts our perception in two main ways when it comes to recognizing signs of rejection. Denial. We ignore obvious signs of disinterest because the truth would be too painful to confront. He's just busy becomes a perpetual excuse for someone who consistently avoids us. Hypervigilance. In contrast, we amplify small ambiguous signals into conclusive evidence of rejection because our fear keeps us in a constant state of alert for social threats. Stoic courage allows us to navigate between these extremes while maintaining what philosophers called phantasia cataleptite, a clear or comprehensive impression that corresponds to reality. To develop this clarity, we must first recognize how fear operates in our psychology. Fear of rejection is, at its core, fear of the truth that not everyone will connect with us, that our value to others is not universal or guaranteed, that we may sometimes be dispensable to people we value. This truth threatens our self-image and sense of belonging, activating primitive fears of social exclusion that, evolutionarily, amounted to a death sentence. Epictetus argued that the first step to wisdom is to accept things as they are. Applied to identifying signs of rejection, this means cultivating the willingness to see these signs clearly, without the distorting filter of fear or excessive desire. One practical exercise for developing this courage is what we might call gradual confrontation. We begin by deliberately paying attention to small social cues in low-stakes emotional contexts, perhaps with casual acquaintances, or in less important professional situations. By practicing clear observation in these contexts, we gradually develop the ability to do so in more meaningful relationships. Another valuable exercise is the honest inventory, a periodic record where we document, as objectively as possible, the behavior patterns of the important people in our lives. This exercise helps us distinguish between occasional behaviors, which may not mean anything, and consistent patterns that deserve our attention. The Stoics closely connected courage to the virtue of justice, giving each thing its due value. Being just in evaluating social cues means neither exaggerating nor minimizing their importance, recognizing that not every rejection is a reflection of our personal worth. Not all acceptance means genuine or lasting connection. Both acceptance and rejection are natural phenomena in human relationships. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, it is not the actions of others that disturb us, but our own judgments. When we apply this principle to identifying signs of rejection, we discover something paradoxical. The more courage we have to see these signs clearly, the less power they have to disturb us. True courage lies not in avoiding the discomfort that comes with acknowledging rejection, but in remaining poised despite it. As Epictetus taught, do not seek to have things happen as you wish, but desire that they happen as they do, and your life will run smoothly. This courage to face the truth, however uncomfortable it may be, paves the way for one of the most powerful transformations in Stoic philosophy, the ability to turn obstacles into opportunities, including transforming rejection into personal growth. Chapter 8. Turning rejection into growth. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes a way. This observation by Marcus Aurelius captures the essence of the Stoic approach to transforming challenges into opportunities for growth. Nowhere is this transformation more powerful than when applied to the experience of social rejection. The Stoics understood deeply that the greatest advances in character and wisdom often arise from our most challenging experiences. Seneca asserted that no one can live happily without first having lived bravely in the face of adversity. Rejection, when approached with the right mindset, becomes not only tolerable but transformative. How exactly can we extract growth from rejection experiences? The process involves several key elements. 1. Honest self-examination. Rejection offers us a mirror, a rare opportunity to see aspects of ourselves that may remain invisible when we're only surrounded by acceptance and validation. Stoic self-examination is not self-deprecation, but balanced and honest investigation. Questions to reflect on after identifying signs of rejection. Is there any valid feedback implicit in this situation that I can consider? Am I being true to my values in my interactions? Are there recurring patterns in situations where I perceive rejection? What does this experience reveal about my attachments and expectations? 2. Wise discrimination. Not every rejection deserves our attention or adaptation. The Stoics were pragmatic in distinguishing between useful feedback and irrelevant opinion. Epictetus asked, if someone informs you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not defend yourself against the thing said, but reply, it is because he does not know my other defects. Otherwise, he would not have mentioned only these. This humorous perspective illustrates an important principle: the ability to discern when a rejection reflects a genuine incompatibility of values, which deserves our consideration, and when it simply reflects the other person's limitations or prejudices, which we can observe with equanimity. 3. The practice of reversal. This Stoic technique involves deliberately seeking the potential benefits in challenging situations. When applied to rejection, we ask, in what ways might this experience strengthen me or direct me toward paths more aligned with my values? For example, romantic rejection can direct us toward more compatible relationships. Professional rejection can reveal paths more aligned with our genuine talents. Social exclusion can connect us with communities that more deeply share our values. 4. Developing virtue. For the Stoics, every situation was an opportunity to practice the cardinal virtues: wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. Rejection offers a particularly fertile training ground. Wisdom to discern the real meaning of social signals. Courage to face the truth without self-deception. Justice so as not to hold oneself or others unfairly responsible. Temperance to respond with balance, without extreme reactions. Case in point, consider a professional whose ideas are consistently dismissed in team meetings. The Stoic approach to transformation will be neither bitter resignation nor self-pity, but balanced inquiry. Is there something about the way I communicate that I can improve? Am I in the right environment for my skills? How can I use this experience to build resilience and clarity about my goals? Stories of transformation abound in literature and in real life. J.K. Rowling transformed multiple rejections into unwavering determination. Steve Jobs used being fired from the company he founded as a catalyst for future innovation. Countless meaningful relationships have blossomed after experiences of rejection that have steered people toward more authentic connections. Marcus Aurelius advised, look within. Within you is a fountain of good, which can always spring up if you always dig. Rejection can be precisely the incentive needed for this inner digging, revealing resources of strength and wisdom that would otherwise lie dormant. A powerful practice exercise is a transformation journal, a regular record where we document not only experiences of rejection, but specifically the lessons, insights, and strengths we draw from those experiences. This exercise trains our minds to automatically seek growth in challenging situations. However, to truly transform rejection into growth, we must first maintain our mental calm in the face of perceived cues, a challenge the Stoics address with specific techniques that remain surprisingly relevant in our modern world. Chapter 9. Techniques for Maintaining Calm. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. This quote, often attributed to Viktor Frankl, but which perfectly encapsulates Stoic wisdom, reveals a secret to remaining calm in the face of rejection signals, consciously cultivating the space between noticing a signal and reacting to it. The Stoics developed specific techniques to expand this vital space, allowing us to respond wisely rather than reacting on impulse. These practices are particularly valuable when we recognize signs of rejection, when our instinctive reactions often make the situation worse. The first of these techniques is the Stoic pause, a deliberate moment of suspension between perception and reaction. Epictetus instructed, "Do not be carried away by the intensity of an impression, but say, 'Impression, wait for me a little while. Let me see what you are and what you are about. Let me test you.'" In practical terms, when we notice a possible sign of rejection, an unanswered message, an unwelcome invitation, a glance averted, we can implement this pause through conscious, deep breathing. This simple action interrupts the automatic cycle of emotional reaction, creating space for a more balanced response. A specific breathing practice recommended by the late Stoics involved counting while breathing, inhaling for a count of 4, holding briefly, and exhaling for a count of 6. This breathing pattern activates the parasympathetic nervous system, counteracting the fight or flight response that rejection signals often trigger. In addition to mindful pausing, the Stoics practice constructive self-talk, a form of deliberate self-talk that redirects thoughts toward more balanced perspectives. This practice is especially powerful when our automatic thoughts tend toward catastrophic interpretations of ambiguous social cues. For example, when we don't get a response to an important message, our automatic inner monologue might be, "She's ignoring me. She must be offended by something I said. We'll probably never speak again." Epictetus-inspired constructive self-talk would redirect these thoughts. This unanswered message is a neutral fact. My interpretation is just one of many possible. She may be busy or distracted or undecided about how to respond. Even if she is deliberately avoiding me, this does not define my worth. I have internal resources to deal with any scenario. A complementary technique is Stoic Sage Visualization, a mental exercise in which we imagine how a person of extraordinary wisdom and equanimity will respond to the situation we are facing. How would Seneca react to this unanswered email? How would Marcus Aurelius deal with being excluded from this group? This exercise offers a psychological distance, allowing us to see the situation not through the lens of our insecurities, but through the eyes of someone who embodies the ideals of balance and wisdom that we aspire to cultivate. To develop greater equanimity in the face of negative social cues, the Stoics also practice what we might call disidentification, the recognition that we are not our social experiences. As Epictetus reminded us, remember that you are an actor in a play of whatever kind the director chooses. This perspective helps us see that being rejected in a specific context is just a temporary role we are experiencing, not a definition of who we fundamentally are. Rejection is something we experience, not something we are. To build long-term tranquility, the Stoics recommended daily practices that strengthen our ability to maintain balance in all circumstances. These include morning reflection. Start the day by contemplating potential social challenges and visualizing balanced responses. Afternoon review. End the day by examining how we respond to social cues, celebrating moment of balance, and identify opportunities for improvement. Voluntary discomfort practice. Deliberately exposing yourself to small, controllable rejections to develop psychological antibodies. Contemplation of impermanence. Regularly remembering that all social configurations, both acceptances and rejections, are temporary in nature. One of the most powerful techniques for maintaining calm in the face of rejection is also one of the most counterintuitive. The practice of love of fate, or more fatty, the radical acceptance and even embrace of everything that happens, including experiences of rejection. This revolutionary perspective is the subject of our final chapter. Chapter 10, Applying Amor Fati, Amor Fati, the love of fate. This Latin phrase, though not originally from classical Stoic texts, perfectly captures a culmination of Stoic wisdom, not merely to accept what happens, but to embrace it as necessary and even perfect for our development. Marcus Aurelius expressed this idea when he wrote, "Love only what happens to you and is woven by fate, for what could be better suited to you?" This radical perspective invites us to make a profound transformation in the way we view rejection. What if, instead of merely tolerating it, we could truly embrace it as an essential part of a life well lived? The concept of amor fati does not suggest a passive resignation or a masochistic celebration of suffering. It suggests instead the recognition that our experiences, especially challenging ones, are instruments of growth and self-discovery. Rejection, viewed through this lens, becomes not an obstacle to be overcome, but an essential catalyst for our development as human beings. Consider how much we learn about ourselves through rejection experiences. We discover our deepest values when we are rejected for remaining true to them. We identify our true priorities when forced to reevaluate relationships. We develop emotional resilience that no amount of constant acceptance could forge. We refine our ability to discern who to invest our energy with and how. On a deeper practical level, try to avoid all rejection is not only impossible, but counterproductive to our flourishing. The person who never risks rejection is someone who never expresses truly original ideas. Avoid genuine vulnerability in relationships. Compromises core values to please others. Stays in toxic environments out of fear of uncertainty. The Stoics understood that true freedom comes not from controlling the external world to avoid discomfort, but from developing the inner strength to thrive regardless of external circumstances. Rejection provides precisely the training needed to develop this strength. A fundamental tenet of Stoic wisdom is to recognize that not all relationships are right for us, and that this is perfectly natural. As Epictetus observed, if a shoemaker were to say to me, "You know nothing about making shoes," I would not mind. But if someone were to say to me, "You know nothing about what is good and evil," then I would have reason to be offended. This perspective reminds us that relational incompatibilities are not moral failings. They are simply natural realities. Just as not every seed thrives in every soil, not every human connection is destined to flourish. Recognizing this is not pessimism, but wisdom. One of the most transformative aspects of amor fati is the ability to cultivate gratitude even for experiences of rejection. As a concrete practice, we can regularly ask ourselves, in what ways has this particular experience of rejection served me? The answers often reveal unexpected benefits. Targeting people more aligned with our values. Freedom from situations that secretly drained us. Catalyzing personal growth that otherwise would not have occurred. Clarification of our true wants and needs. There's a profound paradox in the Stoic approach to rejection. The more we develop the ability to genuinely accept rejection as a natural part of life, the less likely we are to experience it. This apparent contradiction has several explanations. When we don't fear rejection, we show up authentically, naturally attracting those who resonate with who we truly are. The absence of desperation for approval makes us more psychologically attractive, as we project a confidence that comes from inner security. The ability to see social cues clearly, without the filter of fear, allows us to invest our energy in connections with greater potential for reciprocity. A willingness to accept natural incompatibilities allows us to end relationships gracefully, often transforming potentially painful rejections into mutually respectful transitions. A final exercise for cultivating amor fati toward rejection is the practice of anticipatory gratitude, an advanced form of negative visualization where we not only anticipate possible rejections, but deliberately visualize how we might eventually be grateful for them. This exercise cultivates a deep faith in life and our ability to transform any experience into growth. As Marcus Aurelius concluded, "Whatever happens, happens justly. Look closely and you'll find that it is so." Rejection, seen through this lens, is not a mistake of the universe or a personal failing. It is simply part of the fabric of the human experience, as necessary as acceptance for our full development as human beings. Along this journey through Stoic wisdom, we explore how to identify signs of rejection with clarity of mind, without the distorting filters of fear or insecurity. We learn to distinguish between objective facts and subjective interpretations, to recognize what is and is not within our control, and to observe nonverbal cues with the precision of scientists, not with the anxiety of someone who fears judgment. We discover how to differentiate real rejection from projections of our anxiety, how to cultivate a healthy form of indifference that allows us to see more clearly, and how to practice negative visualization to build resilience. We explore the importance of courage in facing the truth, the possibility of transforming rejection into growth, specific techniques for maintaining calm, and finally, the revolutionary perspective of amor fati. As the Stoics understood more than 2,000 years ago, and as modern psychology confirms, our relationship to rejection profoundly shapes our experience of life. When we develop the ability to identify signs of rejection with balanced clarity, neither denying their existence nor allowing them to define our worth, we gain extraordinary psychological freedom. Remember that this journey is not linear. It is an ongoing practice. There will be days when we master these principles and days when our insecurities prevail. The important thing is to return, with patience and self-discipline, to the path of mental clarity and inner strength. As a modern Stoic would say, true freedom is not in being universally accepted, but in remaining true to your values regardless of the opinions of others. It is not in avoiding all rejection, but in maintaining your dignity and tranquility in the face of it. I invite you to share your own experiences and insights on how to apply these principles in your life in the comments. Together, we can build a community of modern Stoic practitioners, supporting each other on the path to wisdom and resilience. If this video was valuable to you, please consider subscribing to the channel for more content on Stoic practices applied to contemporary challenges. I sincerely appreciate your attention and presence. See you next time